After the release of the original Ghost Recon on the PC, various expansion packs and ports, Ubisoft made the eyebrow-raising decision to push the Tom Clancy brand onto the console market. The Xbox easily benefited the best with some great multiplayer and action games such as Rainbow Six. Yes, it was a slap across the face for the PC crowd, but Ghost Recon 2 for the Xbox is a solid title. The first thing that becomes apparent is a switch from the slow simulator-styled first-person tactical shooter to the faster-paced third-person action gameplay. Instead of just tweaking the mechanics of the game for the sequel, they basically created a completely unrecognizable experience. While still a tactical shooter at heart, it definitely plays like a console shooter through and through, and most of the game's mechanics would stay in place well into the advanced Warfighter games. Instead of switching between soldiers that made up a unit, you control Captain Scott Mitchell, commander of the Ghosts, basically Delta Force without the Delta Force. Unlike prior Tom Clancy games, there's actually a story here with proper characters, presented in a very slick History Channel-like documentary. It chronicles the Ghosts' deployment in North Korea, taking down a rogue general hell-bent on starting a war that may engulf the entire continent. So basically, the whole game can be seen as flashbacks of what went down. Still though, it's a fairly straightforward simplistic narrative following the style of Clancy's writing. But that's fine, you don't need to give me much of a reason to fight the bad guys. The theming of the game is very much that of a gritty blockbuster than the chilling, slow pace of prior Tom Clancy titles. You get a good amount of missions spread across numerous Korean environments, from burnout cities to steep valleys and hills. Your objectives usually vary from search and destroy, reinforcing other military personnel, defending the area from incoming attacks, and clearing the area of hostiles. While this is all very stock standard stuff, it's kept interesting by the firefights and engagements that involve you and your squad. One mission will have you defending a riverbank from incoming mortar fire and infantry charges, the next may involve you working with some Germans as you clear out some warehouses. The levels are quite large, with different structures and environmental geometry that keeps the objectives and battles from becoming boring. The game encourages more long-distance action with your squad. These points are arguably the best parts of the game. You fight a lot more enemies in the sequel, possibly making up for their lack of real intelligence. They drop quickly in only a few rounds, so no fear of them being bullet sponges. You don't die nearly as fast as you previously would, unless you play on high difficulties. This was obviously a move to mitigate the lack of hot swapping between units and lowering the frustration for console players. You will die fairly often in the game, but you have an actual life bar. If your squad mates get taken down, you can usually revive them. Dying can be confusing. You can take multiple bullets before going down or get dropped by one. I think it has to do where you hit and what caliber was used, but the game never makes this clear. When you die, you go back to your last save. Thankfully, you can create any number of saves throughout the missions. Admittedly, it still contains some trial and error and allows abuse of this system, but it saves the game from being utterly unplayable. Most missions allow you to choose your weapon loadout for the mission, with a good selection of firearms broken up by classes. While the game is usually played in a third-person view, you can quickly go into a first-person mode to knock down enemies from a distance. The first-person option is definitely more accurate, however, the new over-the-shoulder perspective works rather well too. It's pretty satisfying and usually reliable firing from the hip. The controls feel well mapped and fluid, allowing easy commands on the go. It still keeps some realism, like the body animations, switching weapons, and delays in certain actions. But it definitely streamlined the more hardcore mechanics in certain aspects, like ammo dumps restoring all your ammunition, making it feel a bit more gamey. Your teammates are for the most part a reliable crew. You have a simple but easy to use command hot wheel, as well as additional buttons that allow your squad to move, flank, regroup, attack, and hold fire. Since the levels are a bit more linear, you can't just move your soldiers around like in the first game, but they follow you and your commands with little hiccups. They do pull off some very impressive actions, like being able to effectively take out armor and airborne enemies, which is really helpful. If your allies do die, they're not permanently gone, which while was annoying, was definitely a cool persistent feature in the original. It made your mistakes and losses feel significant and impactful. Besides the typical stages that involve your squad, you also have one-man insertion missions where you're equipped with a high-powered assault rifle, as well as access to a laser designator to call down airstrikes on vehicles. The mission objectives are still mostly the same, but with just your boots on the ground, things can get pretty heated. These levels are rather refreshing. Your assault rifle has a nifty grenade launcher as the alt fire, and the laser designator allows you to wreak havoc on the opposition without having to worry about your allies. You're even allowed to use a gun to peek around walls, very similar to what was used in Killswitch and later Gears of War. Graphically, Ghost Recon 2 looks and sounds great. The environments are varied, interesting, and are full of life, giving a great sense of authenticity to the locations you pass through. Explosions and gunfire rocked the screen, spraying dirt and debris into the air. Models and animations look excellent, with plenty of small details that change depending on your general position and action. It's good stuff with few complaints to be made. It really showed off the Xbox hardware at the time, and it still looks rather nice. Ghost Recon 2 doesn't have much in common with the tough original game, but it manages to come on top as a very competent action game for the Xbox. True, it basically betrayed the first game's fanbase, but it established the future successes of the Tom Clancy brand. The series would move into an interesting direction, splitting off for both the consoles and the PC platforms, and what came out was some very different and interesting games.